It's a pretty nasty, wet day in deepest Surrey. We're at the now legendary Farm Studios that Genesis bought and developed in 1980.
Sunny England.
Mike and Tony are just arriving.
Good eye.
Oh,
we are going that way.
And I've got the, not a sample, this is the dressing for the salad. Very civilised we are.
Okay.
Phil is running late.
Welcome to Fisher Lane Farm Studio, home of everything.
Phil is flying in from his house in Geneva, and we've learned that he's overslept.
Well, it's like
How nice to see you, mate.
We're about to film a very informal conversation with Genesis. This is part one.
Yeah, I can get that much. Ah, am I mic'd up? Okay, yeah.
Fabulous.
If it's normal. Stick in the middle.
Yeah, I think so. Symmetry. Short one in the middle.
I'm in the middle, eh?
Well, we thought.
Whatever gave you that idea?
Yeah, I just...
Youngest in the middle. Do you know we're all the same age today?
What do you mean today?
Well, we only are the same age for about a week or two, aren't we?
I don't know, I don't know about a birthday.
Yeah, because he's, you know, we're all 63.
Yeah.
There you
Well,
go.
like something like it.
Yeah.
Who's the oldest?
Moi.
And we'll
Only
always,
just. Well,
we'll
of course,
always
you know,
be-
Peter
we're a
and,
bit
Peter and
close,
Steve are
aren't
both
we?
older
Yeah.
than me, yeah?
Are they?
Yeah. Just.
It's amazing getting lasted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is Steve the oldest?
Steve's the oldest by a day, I think. And then Pete. And me.
Alright.
Fascinating information.
It's like a long running relationship, like 40 years now. What's the secret?
Shouldn't be forward to me, I can't see you.
Well, that's just as well, really.
Otherwise you've got to lean back all the time. Yeah, just... That's it, yeah.
I'll get out of the way, don't worry.
I can't engage, you know.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's the music. The music is what the reason why we're together, really. I mean, we'll get on very well, but
Yeah, we certainly
we
wouldn't
don't.
be together.
That's right. We wouldn't.
Not this one now.
We wouldn't have kept up the way we have. You know, I didn't even know Mike at school. You know, as has been said many times, and so the sort of friendship is very much built around the music. But I mean, we do get on very well apart from that. But you know, we don't perhaps do all that much together apart. If you know what I mean. Do you want to add something?
Well, you know, you think how many years we've actually been together, you know, with the touring, you know. So we're still sort of trying to find our downtime, I think, actually. You know, we spent months and months, so it's sort of, you don't sort of... I'm rambling already.
If you think about all having your own solo careers, taking off, what would you say, round about sort of 78, 79, at the point that Phil had indicated you need to go to Vancouver, you both had...
That's moving on. Just bypass Pete's gone, right, so there we are.
It's a good idea, I always try.
We can jump around.
No, it's all right.
Taking off is relative, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think the solo career is, in a sense, what kept the group together. But mind you, if I'd had the success Phil had, I'm not sure I'd have come back. You know, it's a strange thing, really. It always felt
Between you and me, isn't it?
it always felt good coming back together again. I suppose it's just sort of, you know, plug gaps. You're going to say anything in this interview? Or just
I'm waiting. I know, you know, I mean, it is the music, and it's, you know, I mean, it's like the old days, really. I mean, people got together to form groups because they were mates. You know, that was the first reason, really. And, you know, it's although we didn't follow that route particularly, I mean, you've still got to like each other. And I don't know how bands you know, do that and not like each other. You know, I mean, or argue a lot anyway. I mean, we used to argue a bit more than...
Yeah, not much. Musically, you know, not really about... I mean, I do think it's... We've had the same manager, which is quite important. And a sort of projects outside the band started. But I mean, we never really. Most bands argue about money, and I can't think of one argument really about. Can you money? Are you serious?
No, you got.
Why are you money? Oh, it was never about that really. I think we just. The other thing I think we're having gone from being an expert now, having done this bloody book. I'm an expert on the last 40 years.
Pretty inaccurate, your book.
Is it?
Attorney concurs.
I'm gonna read it.
Don't bother.
Attorney concurs.
I thought I've lived it, but I will read it.
It's quite funny, I think. No, going from 5 to 4 to 3, it kind of made it easier each time. We hit the 3. I mean, the 5 was 5 and the 4 was a great time, but just as people, we hit the 3, and suddenly you sort of gain space, don't you? You know what I mean? As what we decide and how we do things. I think that did help a lot.
I think also we were lucky that, well, in some ways we were lucky that you didn't have any kind of overnight success. It took us a very long time to get anywhere. So it was a very slow build, and there was no sort of chance there for a kind of a real ego thing happening. And by the time we actually made it, we were all well into our late 20s. And also by the time, obviously, the success started happening solo-wise, like with Phil and everything. I think if that had happened when we were sort of 21, it would have been very difficult to take. But by the time you get a bit older, you're a bit wiser, a bit more able to take it on the chin, I suppose.
Yeah.
Did you take it on the chin, Phil?
Yes, I did. Many times. No, the idea was, kind of deflating the ego. I mean, if you ever got a slightest bit uppity, it was like, well, of course, I mean, a 3-chord music only really goes you that far, though. I mean, it was all done in good fun, But we just kind of knew which buttons to press, I guess. I mean, I never felt the urge to go. It's funny, it's one of those things that never really cropped up because, well, for one thing, the kind of way I did it with my own stuff was very different from the kind of music that we wrote. So, for a long while, it was possible, it kind of satisfied the two sides of me, if you like. And I also worried that if I left and the group didn't carry on, I literally worried what would happen to the road crew, what would happen. It was too complicated to leave. So, I sort of started to get oversensitive about the crew's families, and these people have been with you for a long, long time. And they've all got families, and suddenly...
Still worried about them, still are.
Yeah, do lose sleep at night. Yeah, I don't think that we did have any fights. The only fighting, or not literal fighting, but sort of wars of words were when I first joined in Farnham. I mean, that was...
days, yeah.
Yeah, that was really 1970, and everybody was, a little new to it. And...
well, younger and more intense.
Yeah.
I used to have the odd tantrum, I seem to remember.
I do remember that.
I remember rushing out one time. There's an argument, I think, over a chord in some song.
Banging your
with
keyboards
Peter.
with the reverb on.
Peter and I could sometimes set each other off. And, I remember running around sort of Farnham.
Yeah.
And coming back in again. It was your first rehearsal with us too, I think.
It was like that, yeah.
He thought we were breaking up. You know what I mean? This is a normal row. You
just joined. I was enjoying my £10 a week.
It was all over.
But that was the only time, and the only other time it came anywhere near physical was I think it was Watford. Well, something had happened. And,
encore.
Yeah, an encore. Yeah, and something had happened on stage, and we were, analysing it in the time it took, for you to go out to do an encore. And there was chairs being thrown, and then...
well, this is a story, of course, that's in Mike's book, but it's actually wrong, which he admits now, because he was the one who wouldn't do the encore. And
it's possible I was wrong, yeah, it's possible.
And
Which is inaccurate.
And for some reason or other, I think I probably, being the most vocal, sort of said, "We've got to do it. God, we got to really well, must do it," and everything. He said, "I'm not bloody doing it." You know? And so he went. Yeah, he got angry with me. And when we went back on stage, he finally managed to persuade him to do it one another. He tried to kick me, throw a chair at me, and stuff. But
it was one of those things.
But it was the fact you remember. It's interesting because that's one of the few occasions, I think.
Yeah. I mean, sort of putting your foot behind a person so they tripped up. Yeah, and went all the way up onto the stage. And then it was completely
They played a song, swiping away the. I think you almost sort of feel people don't really believe us when we say, we didn't row really, because I think what they forget is that we're having a good time. The albums, 3 Piece onwards, were all easy to write, and the last 2 or 3, I mean, they kind of just. I think they were such fun to write. They kind of came easily, And so when you're doing that, no need to argue really. Yeah,
I also think as you get to know each other, you sort of, in the end, you do know perhaps when to sort of lay back a little bit in a way you would have been more intense about something, I think it's just as you get older, it gets easier, and, as long as you like each other and you get on well, then it should all work, really. It's like a marriage.
Would you all agree about something like, what you consider to be the best Genesis album? Would you all agree on that?
Not that alternate.
You all differ.
I think we probably differ a bit. Some agree.
I think I change all the time.
Yes, I do.
Actually. We never had what was sort of like a flaw, a dark side. We never had one of those albums that was like we're defined by. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I wouldn't really know where to start.
They've all got things on them, I mean, it's not like complete. They're just things that. You don't. Maybe it got more complete as time went on, but a lot of it is how much fun you had doing it, but not necessarily in retrospect does it sound as good as you thought. I don't know. I don't think we'd all agree anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a slight difference with early records as well. There's sort of slight nostalgia and stuff, everything in there as well. So it's rather difficult for us to sort of compare them, I suppose. And so one tends to divide it up slightly into eras. So the early era.
The record had a lot of meaning for you at the time. I mean, maybe something like Trespass, when you were making it, or Nursery Crime, because it was such an achievement at that stage. You weren't well known. But maybe that had more meaning for you then. And it's nostalgic in your mind, but you probably wouldn't claim that those were the best records.
No.
Food was good.
I think.
Right, we stayed at Tony Stratton Smith's country home for the making of that, and we had it's like
fantastic rock cakes. I remember. Wonderful. Never had one as good since then, I have to say. But
I think some albums are harder to write, slow to write. And that always slightly puts me off a little bit, you know what I mean? The ones that were easy to write, I kind of favour really, because they sort of, I think maybe if they're not better, the whole process was slightly more fun.
Was Lamb harder to write?
Well, it was hard because our singer left in the middle of it and stuff. But it was. It's a funny era. I don't remember it as being the most pleasurable era. We all brought a lot of music in, and we had to create music particularly to fit the plot and everything, which was quite fun. But it's
double album, twice as long.
Yeah.
It was. I think we all really liked the little improvised sections on that album more than anything else. Almost, it became a sort of, I don't know. Some of the other bits just became a bit intense. And the tour afterwards was not the easiest tour we've ever done, and with all the visual effects we had, which was great fun to do and set it all up, but nothing ever worked properly, so you're always a bit disappointed every night, and you're playing to audiences who'd never heard the stuff before, which was a bit tedious.
And you still couldn't understand it.
Yeah, you couldn't. That's into hell. And who understands the story anyhow? Let's face it. It kind of to me that was. I don't. I know it's often cited as a sort of classic of the early period, but I think both the albums that came before were a lot better, in my opinion.
Then the one after, Trigger the Tail, that was kind of that just for us after having gone through a rather uphill thing with Pete and the sort of, him leaving and the sort of the dramas and stuff. Trixie and Beat, isn't it? It just sort of came out pretty quickly.
Except for the Muggalugs. Took the Tail video.
Oh,
yeah. I never did like that.
What, the shoes? Is that what they're called?
No, I was a
shock-
small guy on a
it's a
piano.
shocker, actually. It's a shocker.
It was not
Oh,
my,
that wasn't the best of our videos. I can do that.
Those are like, It's
see, that was the whole thing, see?
bit of that.
Me being small.
Nothing's changed then, yeah.
there's the videos when you've got a little fisherman's hat on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
And
one.
you're all standing around the piano, and but it has got a sort of fresh, innocent thing about it.
Has a charm, doesn't it?
It has a charm.
I can't find that one. I can't.
It's that sort of, you know.
And this is really the first time you're singing with them, and it's kind of like you're the new boy, and you're kind of sweet, and you've got a more English voice than later, I think. Maybe it's Peter's influence still there. Like you enunciate in a more English way.
I think it's it's your choir boy voice, isn't it? We should say. We soon ruined that.
Just before we ruined
Those
it.
long tours, you know.
Yeah, no.
But it wasn't really the MTV era at that point. That was
No, well, videos were kind of not really done. We just did it. In fact, the first one we did was the song Robbery, Assault and Battery. I don't quite know why we did that, because it was never going to be shown on TV. It never was, I don't think. It was never going to be a hit. It was never going to be anything. But we enjoyed ourselves doing that, dressing up in sort of like as if it was sort of like an old Oliver kind of set. And then the other,
Tony enjoys dressing up. You've got that. He enjoyed dressing up.
I don't know about that. But yeah, so they were not. We did them really as little promotional things, I suppose. But there was really no outlet for it in those days. There was no. And as I said, the BBC weren't going to play any of them.
I mean, that stuff was on MTV. It was just starting, I guess. We made. Queen were doing videos before there was MTV. But I remember being in Dallas, rehearsing. We always spend time there. I mean, when the 5 VJ, Martha Quinn and Mark Goodman and all that lot, there was just music, and they did show those 3 videos quite a lot. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's worth doing them then.
Yeah, I mean, no one else. No one else did.
when you mention Genesis to people of a certain generation, you mention Genesis to especially women in their late 40s, 50s.
Which we don't really. Hello, Darren. Yes. You're a Genesis.
They talk about having this kind of like, oh my God, Genesis. I love them, but I don't tell my boyfriend I've got it on my iPod because they're talking about 80s Genesis, and it's very different. Where from talk to older guys, it's all about prog rock, but the fact is that this is the full spectrum of Genesis is both these periods. It's both, and there is something in there which, as soon as you hear a song from any era, it's Genesis. There's something in the sound which is kind of gives it this
above notes.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. I think it's that sustaining quality that carries it through. So I personally think people should be fans of all the age, all the eras of Genesis.
I think people, but you're most intense with what you like when you're in your teenage years, so that kind of sticks with you. And often you find that people, whatever age they are, that's the period of Genesis they like the best, or whatever. So it doesn't, surprise me. And we look on it ourselves, I think, very much as a complete sort of body of work, if you want one another. So with some more complex stuff and some simpler stuff. And it's not necessarily all stacked one end or the other. I think it does mix around a bit. But we did get much better at writing, more concise songs and slightly more direct lyrics, I think, which was something we found, particularly myself, I found very difficult in the early days to write a direct lyric. You had to sort of cover it up with.
And in fact, so did Pete. I mean, there's a thing about this progressive era, which is, looking back, actually, when I hear Thumbs Winning, which I hardly ever do, but I do, it's every night. It's good. I mean, it's a great piece of music, But then, when Peter left, Peter changed too. I think had Peter stayed, we might have gone different anyway.
And you adapt to the times you live in as well, but with the rise of MTV.
We don't adapt. It doesn't affect us, does it? Really? You don't adapt. You don't think about it.
No, but it probably does affect you subconsciously without you realising it. I think. I mean, I think we did make a conscious decision around the time of Avocab to sort of that we'd kind of done a certain sort of thing. I know people think of the prog era being Pete era, but it really carried right through to Duke, I think. And it was sort of after that, on Duke, we started doing one or two slightly more slightly different kind of things, and I think we felt that was a really interesting direction to go, and we try and go further with that. And so with Abacab, we went, quite far in that direction. I think maybe too far, some would say. But it sort of opened it up a little bit to a kind of to different kind of music. And we came into the business loving the Beatles and Town of Motown and all that. Which is just pop music. So that it wasn't surprising. That was always going to be something we wanted to do more of.
Yeah, you told me the other day you're a huge fan of Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
Pet Sounds is kind of like an inspiration because it's so, in a way, experimental, but it's totally accessible.
Well, that's what was so clever about it was the fact that it was, it's an incredible piece of music really, because it musically is quite complex, certainly harmonically. A lot of the songs do very strange things that you weren't being done by any other group, including the Beatles and stuff. And yet the music was still very popular, and it's a sort of a real talent to be able to do that, I think. And for me, it was a very profound album at the time.
It's kind of surprising. I was surprised when you said that, because I see it as brilliant pop music, not something that 20-year-old who was really trying to create more kind of out there music in the early 70s would necessarily be inspired by. So I thought it's quite interesting, because it might mean that you were much more open to the 3-minute song, or the hit, than your followers at that time might have thought.
Well, that's the trouble. I think people, they tend to put you in boxes, and I mean, he was a huge Beach Boys fan, and things like Good Vibrations and God Only Knows and Heroes and Villains, and just to name a few of the obvious ones, they were really sort of pop music, but just outside the box, and they were very intelligent kind of songs, and they weren't like pop music in that respect. And I mean, we've always been put in the progressive rock band, progressive rock music box, but really that's because we were more like Yes and more like King Crimson than apparently the Beach Boys. But it's, when it comes to the music, it's still pop music, but it's outside the box, Well, boxes. I didn't box.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you necessarily also, you can like music without necessarily being the stuff you write. I mean, we wrote what came to us as a group, what worked for all of us being there in the same room and stuff. And also you're trying to do things that perhaps haven't been done before. A lot of people were doing really great pop music. Didn't perhaps need us to do sort of 3-minute songs. There were a lot of groups doing that and doing it very well. It just excited us a little bit more, being able to say, well, what if you do this? You join a few bits up and you change the time signature and you put a few chords here or whatever. I mean, it wasn't something very contrived like that, but it's just, you just let yourself go where you would. And then you ended up with a 26-minute long piece in Supper's Ready, which in some ways it's sort of, you break it up, it's a combination of songs rather than one. It's like a suite rather than one big kind of wild thing.
And we never heard it together until it was edited together. It wasn't composed as one piece. We just knew that it would be eventually run into each other, So the day we edited it together was the first time we'd heard it. And if it hadn't worked, we'd have probably edited it in a different way. Or we didn't like it, but it turned out it was good.
Watch out for part 2, where they tell us the story of their beloved studio.